The hack is thinking about things in these two ways. So the first is when you're making a decision on what you're for versus what you're against. Okay. So this can seem kind of like slight and hard to kind of place, but I will give you a lot of examples and tell you what I mean there. But what I really mean is that a lot of us make decisions in our business from and against. I don't like that. I don't want that. I don't want that to happen again. Like so many of our decisions come from like, I'm against that happening ever again. And we're making very few decisions from the place of I'm for, like, I want that. I'm for more of that. Okay. So I'll walk you through some examples there. And then the second thing is to look at micro over macro. So we want to be making decisions from the place of for, and we want to be making decisions from the macro and not the micro. And so what I mean by that is that just like we're so quick to make decisions from a place of against, we're so quick to make decisions from a micro situation. So like something happens with a client, we don't like it, we're against it. And all of a sudden we're like changing a ton of shit in our business because we're making a bunch of decisions around it, right? And really that doesn't serve us, and it's really not strategic. And it really makes it hard to continue to move forward. So I'll give you some examples of that, and then we'll kind of talk about how to use it as a hack for decision making, because it really makes such a fucking difference in your business. But like, I'll just give you one little example to start out. But like, say you have a situation where a client doesn't pay, right? Like they signed a contract and now they're not, paying, or they, dipped out of the contract and you can't get in touch with them, whatever, right? So what a lot of people will do then is make an against decision and a micro decision. So what I mean by that is we'll be like, I never want this to happen again, i.e. like I'm against this happening ever again. And so I'm going to change it to the fact that all clients that work with me now have to be paid in full, right? But what happened was really a micro thing. Like maybe this one client had this issue, but you've had 12 that it's been totally fine on payment plans, right? So it's definitely a micro, not a macro. And you're making the decision of what you're against. Like I'm against ever happening or ever having this happen again versus what you're for. Like, are you for pay in full? I have no problem with someone that only wants to take pay in full in their business, but are you actually for that? Is that actually what feels good? Or are you just making a reactive decision based on a micro thing that happened? Does that make sense? And so most business owners unknowingly go through their whole decision or go through their whole business making big changes based on micro incidences and big changes based on things that they're against and not actually things that they're for, right? And so then what happens is they'll do this over and over again for a while, and we'll kind of get to a certain point and look around and be like, gosh, I like have all this shit in my business that I don't even know if I like. Like, did I ever consider like macro? Am I really all about pay in fulls? Did I really consider, all of these things? No. So I have a business that I haven't necessarily been for. It's just an against and a reaction to all of these things that I think I don't want. Right? Can you guys see how it's easy to get in that hamster wheel kind of thing? And so then it feels like you never picked anything in your business. Like you have pay in full only option, but you didn't really pick it. You did it as a reaction to something, right? And so then the business stops feeling really great. So again, it's totally fine to pick pay in full, but I would want you to do that because you fully believed in that, because on a macro level, you believe pay in full is the most of service to your clients. You believe that it's most aligned with your values. You are so for having everyone pay in full, right? Then that's going to feel really good to you. And it's going to be really easy to sell on calls. It's going to be easy to speak about. It's going to be easy to get clients on board with that. If you just did it because you want to make sure this one situation never happens again, good luck selling that on a sales call. It's going to be really hard, because what are you going to say? Like, oh, well, I do pay in full because I want to make sure that, no one ever flakes out, right? So you want to make sure you're doing everything in your business and making every decision in your business from a place of what are you for, because that's how you get other people on board. That's how it gets really simple. That's how it gets super strategic, because you're going to be so much more effective at helping people see and understand why you're doing certain things in your business, because it's what you're for. Is that making sense? If you're listening, let me know. Tell me if it's making sense or if you have any questions. But again, just so easy to get caught in that trap of everything is a reaction to, everything is an against, and everything is based on like a micro incident. Like, even if you do only pay in full, it's totally possible that at some point someone's going to ask for a refund. It's totally possible that at some point a client's going to give you a hard time, right? So you really want to know that you're locked into it no matter what, versus you're doing it just because you think it avoids this certain situation, right? Because then you're building a business that is not actually in alignment with you. So when you can filter decisions through, okay, what am I for here and what actually makes sense on a macro level, you stop reacting to all these little things in your business. And it's actually really fucking simple to make a decision. And it's super strategic because, again, it's easier to sell. It feels more in alignment for you. And you're making sure you're building a business that you actually like versus one that's just a reaction to all the things you didn't like, right? Michelle says, it sounds like it's about intentionally choosing rather than defaulting, if I'm following correctly. For sure. It's about that choice. And it's about looking at it through these two lenses. Am I choosing what I'm for, not what I'm against? And am I choosing it for the macro, not the micro? Right? So those two things are your decision-making hacks, basically. So when you are about to do something in your business, can you fully say you're for it and why? So here's another example. Like, let's say I am overwhelmed by Facebook groups. And so I'm like, I hate Facebook groups, so I'm going to go on Instagram. The moment there would be to stop and be like, but am I for Instagram? What do I love about Instagram? What are all the fours I can have there, right? I'm for it because I like stories. I like interacting like this. I like this. Like, how can I get really for it instead of like, I'm only picking it because I'm against fucking Facebook groups, right? And then am I choosing it for the macro? Like, does that make the most sense on a broad scale versus like today I'm overwhelmed in groups? So macro, like, are my people there? Does that make more sense? Is that more aligned with my content strategy? Like, is that true overall, or is it true today because I'm having a hard day, or this week because I'm having a super overwhelming week? Right? So whenever a client's telling me, I want to do this instead, I'm like, tell me all the reasons you're for that. Like, how are we getting bought in? How are we getting excited there? Because a lot of times when a client will tell me they want to change something, they're telling me all the reasons they're against the other thing, right? I'm going to focus on Instagram more because I don't like this about Facebook groups and this about Facebook groups and that about Facebook groups and that. And I'm like, okay, that's all fine. You don't have to like any of those things, but what are we actually for? What actually are we intentionally going to be building off of? So if you can just catch yourself in those moments, right? You can always give yourself a ton of reasons why you're against something and it's not working. But if you can figure out what you're really about and what you're really for, that will build your business. So like an example for me is I am for one-on-one, right? So I could be against groups and I could have been like, I hate groups. I'm not doing groups. I don't like groups, whatever. So I'm doing one-on-one. That wouldn't have sustained me through having a one-on-one business for the last 6 years, right? Like, I can't hate groups enough to motivate me to do one-on-one. I have to be like, what am I for about one-on-one? And you guys know there's a million things that I'm for. It's why it's all I sell. It's why it's all I talk about. It's why I'm so good at saying what I'm for all the time. And it's why it's easy to motivate myself because I'm doing something that I'm for. I'm not motivated by being against something else, right? If my motivation was, I hate groups, I wouldn't have let me show up every day doing it for 6 years. Does that make sense? So if your motivation is, I'm going to be on Instagram because I hate Facebook, that motivation is going to be very, very, very short-lived, right? But if your motivation is, I'm going to be on Instagram because I love all of these things about it and I'm so for it in these 10 ways, well, great. Like, you're building a business that's in alignment. You're making good decisions, right? So I really want you to use those two hacks of, am I choosing from a place of for, not against? And am I looking at the macro, not the micro? Because again, The micro stuff, like you might be really upset about that client this week that didn't pay, right? But 5 months from now, you're going to barely even remember that happened, right? And so you don't want to be making those decisions from a micro incident because it's not what's going to build you long term, right? It's not actually being strategic when you're just reacting to one incident, right? No matter what business model you have, no matter what platform you're on, no matter if you do pay in full or if you do, payment plans, or if you do group programs, or if you do one-on-one, there are going to be challenges and trade-offs that you will have to deal with. Hands down. Like every single business model has challenges about it. The benefit of the payment plan is that, you're going to get people in with more ease potentially. But the trade-off is that, yeah, some people could not pay. The benefit of pay in full is you're getting all that money up front. The trade-off is like, you might lose some clients that aren't in the position to step up for that. But if you're choosing from the 4, it's easy to deal with those trade-offs. Like I personally really like payment plans. Like there are so many things I'm for about the client having to reinvest every month, them getting the opportunity to spread that out over time, them to feel like they have a stake in the game every month, me to have that consistent monthly recurring revenue. Like there are so many things that I'm for there, right? That over time makes sense. And so even if a client like had, a situation where they couldn't pay or whatever, I still am for that enough that it's okay, right? But if I was like, well, I'm just going to do payment plans, because one time I had this really bad experience with pay in full and I'm totally against it. Then when that situation happens with pay in full, where I experience oh my gosh, sorry guys. Then when that situation happens with the payment plan where I experience one of those trade-offs, I'm just going to freak out again and make myself wrong. And then I'm going to feel trapped and like neither is a good option. Do you see what I mean? That's how we get ourselves trapped in decisions, because we make all these decisions against something. Then we experience a trade-off of that, but we never were actually for and really invested in that thing. So then we're pissed about the trade-off and it feels like we can make no right decision, right? And so many business owners feel that way. I have so many clients that have come to me just feeling like there's no right decision here. Like I did this to avoid this, and then I had this happen and I tried this to avoid this. And it becomes this never ending cycle of trying to find the perfect thing versus finding the thing that you're actually for, right? And it sounds funny, but I guarantee you, if you ask yourself that, you will be surprised at how many of your decisions in business more naturally come from a place of against. I can say this because I hear it from clients all day. And again, more often than not, when a client is telling me why they want to do something or change something, the first things that are coming up are, here are all the reasons I'm against this thing. And I'm like, that's fine, but what are we for? So I can see that it's a pattern that we so often play out, and that is so kind of natural for our brains to fall into. But again, then what happens? You do this thing because you're against this other thing, right? Then it has challenges, and then you want to let go of that thing too. So you really want to be intentional with every single thing that you're choosing, making sure that it's a for, right? So for my example that I was using earlier of one-on-ones, like the benefit obviously is high, but the trade-off that I experience with having a one-on-one business model is that like I have to be on a lot of calls all day and I have to like be somewhere at a certain time, and there's definitely trade-offs. But because I'm so for one-on-one, it's kind of easy for me to accept those. I feel like I've really intentionally chosen them and it's just a part of it. But if I had picked one-on-one because, I like did a group program once and hated it, right? Then when I was experiencing that trade-off of like, but I'm on calls all day and I have to be somewhere at a certain date and time and whatever, guess what? I would be pretty fucking disappointed, right? And I would feel really lost, and I would feel like, well, maybe this isn't the business for me and all of this stuff, because I was doing it to avoid a negative outcome, just getting a different outcome, versus doing it because I could not be more for that thing. Same thing is true with Facebook groups for me, right? Like I've had this group, pretty much my entire business. I am so for community in this way. I'm so for a place where everyone can promote, right? That's a great example in this community. I'm so for being a place where other people can share their businesses and share their, offers and all of those things. The trade-off of that is tremendous in that we have to moderate this group a lot. We have to delete posts often. We have to, make sure that doesn't get too out of hand. Make sure that people are still otherwise engaging. We have to moderate ladder posts. Ladder posts. Right. But because I am so for community in this way, it's easy for me to deal with those trade-offs. But what happens a lot of the time is, let's just say I had a day where I'm like scrolling through the group and I'm like, I'm so against these fucking ladder posts. I am so against like people just coming in here and spamming. I am just shutting this group down. Right? This happens so much. I'm against all of these things. So I'm shutting this group down. So I shut the fucking group down because I'm like done with it. That was out of control, whatever. But then what am I for? Like, where am I left? What am I left to do with that? Like now I've shut down the group, but what I actually really want is a group and community and a place where I feel like other people should be allowed to promote. So do you see what I mean? It really sticks you when you make all of these against decisions, right? Because then I'm in a position to be like, well, where else am I going to build this community that I want now? And actually, like I had it, I just had, a trade-off of it that I was dealing with. Right. But so many people do that. They see a thing that they don't like in their business. They're against it. They make these big, massive changes. And then they are trapped in a corner because it's like, well, I really do want people to have, be in community with me. And I like, now what? Right. We're trapped. And then we're building a business we don't actually like versus like all the things I'm for about this group far outweigh the things I am against, but I'll never make a decision from an against because I'm not actually being smart or strategic with that, right? I really believe that business is built on relationships and connection and community. And so to make a decision that's against so much of that makes no sense. Is literally not strategic for me, right? So does that make sense where we can just get ourselves in these traps versus like the easiest checkpoint for you in the hack is, wait, am I making this decision as a for or an against? Like ask yourself that for every decision you're making in your business. I check in with myself on that all the time because even though I know that my brain is always going to default to the against because that's what most of us do. Hey, Patricia, thank you for being here. I hope you're doing good. So that's the hack. And then again, micro, macro. Micro, it's annoying as fuck that we have to delete those posts. Macro, I still very much believe in the group, the community, all of those things, right? And so if you can really check yourself on those things, it becomes so much easier and you build a business that is in alignment with you and that you actually like. But what happens in our industry is so many people will tell you how to fix all of these things, right? Like, do you have clients not doing XYZ? Come to me and I'll tell you how to fix it. Like, is your Facebook group getting spammy? Delete it and I'll tell you what to do instead. Like there's all of this stuff, right? Like, or do you have clients that, are defaulting on payment plans? Do pay in full only. That's like the only way to do it, right? Like our industry is built on being like, if something is wrong, be an against and fix it as fast as possible, right? And then you go down these rabbit holes of trying to like fix all these things you're against. And then all of a sudden your business and your options become very limited and very small very quickly. So really, really check in with yourself every single time you're making a strategic decision in your business. What am I for? What am I actually about? What macro actually makes sense for my business? And the other hack for that I tell my clients all the time is don't make a decision when you're upset. Like if a client had someone default on a payment plan or something and they came to me and were like, hey, I think I'm only going to do pay in full. I'd be like, let's table this conversation for 1 week because you literally just had this happen and it's super triggering. And so let's make this decision next week. Right? Also a very simple hack for it. Don't make decisions when you're in the moment like that with something and when you're triggered by something, because you're always going to make a micro decision from a place of against. If you can wait and create that spaciousness, you're going to be much more likely to be able to calm down enough to decide what you're for, right? And to think big picture. So that's just another hack. And it seems so silly, but your business doesn't you don't need to make that decision that day. Like, what would it hurt if you waited a week to decide if you want to do only pay in full or not? Like, it means pretty much nothing, right? Even if you sign 2 clients that week, like, still not that big of a deal. You can always afford to wait a week. So that's something else I would check in on. Again, if you're making those in the moment decisions, they're almost always not going to be strategic. And they're always going to feel super charged. So if you can just table it for a week, and in the meantime, be asking yourself, okay, cool, what am I really for as it relates to payment? How do I really relate to that in my business? What am I really for as it relates to my Facebook group? What am I really for as it relates to how I want to market? Like, when you can keep asking yourself those questions, it is so easy to cut through the noise and make fast decisions. I see this with clients on calls all the time when I'm like, okay, cool. Hear about all the things you're against. What are you actually for? Can we make a decision from that place? It happens so fast because they're like, oh, well, I'm really for, accessibility in my services. I'm for this, I'm for that. I'm like, okay, well, then it kind of makes sense to do this, right? If that's all the stuff you're for. Yes, right? So it's one of those things that almost feels too simple, which I feel like is like stuff I've been sharing lately, because I think that's the stuff we need to hear, because I just see everything in this industry gets so complicated sometimes. And we just need these really simple ways to think about things and these really simple hacks to make business easier, right? And way more strategic. What is it, an Einstein quote that's like, if you can't explain it simply, you don't know it well enough. And I think it's very similar here. Like, can you just simply decide and explain, like, this is what I'm for, and I'm going to act in alignment with that, right? One of my clients, I was on the phone with her today, and she recently had changed process in her business to be much more aligned with what she was for. We did a whole exercise on what she was for, built this process for that. It's been going great. She's gotten, so many more clients, all these things, great things, right? Then someone got upset with her, not upset with her, like super pissed, but more just like frustrated in the process, right? And so her initial kind of reaction was like, I'm against anyone ever being upset, so maybe I should change all of these things, right? And so we kind of had to go back to that reminder of like, well, this whole process is based on what you're for. We're not going to change an entire process based on one person being frustrated for like a few days, right? Because then we're making, again, that micro decision, right? And we're doing it from a place of against. I'm against anyone ever being mad at me, so let me change everything humanly possible to make sure no one is ever mad at me. Someone is always going to be frustrated at some point, no matter what you do. And so we can't make decisions based on that. Or again, we're trapped in business, right? Patricia says, I know, it makes it seem more complicated than what it is. Exactly. Everything gets like that in our space, I think, there's like all these like right ways to do it. And it's like the most strategic way is to build a business based on the things you are for and can really get behind. And the most strategic way is to do it thinking about the macro versus the micro. Someone's upset at me this week is completely micro. Macro is, but the other 20 clients that I've served are all really, really happy. And I feel really aligned to my process and I feel amazing. So that's okay, right? That is how we simplify decisions. But look at how complicated it could be if it was like, well, I changed my whole process and someone's still upset with me, so now I need to change it all again. And then someone else might be upset with me then, and so then I'll change it again. And we can spend years in business making these sweeping big changes in our business over these really micro annoyances or really micro things that we don't like, right? But if we can learn to kind of regulate through that, do our mindset work through that, get to neutral enough to actually make sure we're making the simple and strategic decision, everything gets so much easier. And you can kind of see it for what it is, which is like nothing. This is just someone who's having a bad few days and it happens to be getting taken out on me. Okay. I can see that for what it is. And no process in the world, no matter how perfect it is going to change that, right? Michelle, yes, I am the queen of making things more complicated than they need to be. Totally. And that's what we're really trying to solve for here is how can we make it super, super simple? If it doesn't feel simple, it's probably not the right thing. So that is a good hack to think about. Yes, Allie and I have definitely been talking about this a ton. More to come on literally related to that for sure. Maggie says, yes, I teach personal responsibility. If someone doesn't want that, they can get help from someone else. Love this. Exactly. Exactly. And then I feel okay if they get help from someone else because I know what I'm for, right? If I decide like I'm for this, or if I'm only making decisions from against, then when someone says, well, I want it this different way, then you're going to be more likely to cave because you're not actually really, really, really invested in what you've created. You just created it because you didn't want this other thing, right? But if you feel very invested, like for me, I'm so for one-on-one. So if someone comes to me and is like, well, I really want a group experience, I'm like, I mean, totally, like what recommendations can I give you? Because I am so for what I'm doing, right? Makes it so much easier and it makes it not feel charged when someone needs to go elsewhere, right? But if I'm only doing one-on-one because I hated this one time that I did a group and it really fucked me up in the head, and then someone comes to me about a group, then I'm going to be super disappointed. I'm going to be like, well, they're not going to do one-on-one and that totally sucks and da 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 da. And I'm going to get really spinny around it versus when I can just see like, well, I'm really for one-on-one. And if you're not, that's totally cool. Like, what recommendations can I provide for you? Right? Just really makes it so easy and so simple. But you have to take charge and take your power in deciding what am I for, not making decisions from against, and what is the macro of that, right? So what do I want my business to be doing in a year from now? Like, am I going to feel good about these decisions a year from now? Or am I going to feel good about them this week because it brings down the tension I'm feeling around whatever, this person saying no to me or that client defaulting on a payment plan or, you know, like this client being frustrated, whatever it is. Like if you are making those short-term adjustments in your business to avoid the discomfort of that, you are always going to feel disappointed later on in your business because you didn't think that through. And that's how people end up making these huge adjustments and huge swings in their business. But if you're always coming from a place of for and from the macro, your business is going to stay pretty steady over time and you're going to get better and better at it. And it really does get easier and easier. If you make those big adjustments over micro things, business feels really hard long-term because you're always reworking a process, refiguring something out, getting on a new platform, you know, changing your payment structure, all of these things. And it just feels so intense all the time. But if you've really built the business on what you're for, what you're about, and what you want on the macro level, you don't have to make that many adjustments and things really start to become that well-oiled machine over time. So let me just kind of recap on the hacks that I want you to take away. Number one, ask yourself, am I making a decision for or against? If it's against any things that you don't like or that you hate or whatever, I would really challenge you to stop there and get very clear on what you're for regarding that. What are you for as it relates to this particular incident? Again, like if it's payment plans, like what are you actually for there? Do you really want pay in full clients only? Great. Be a for of that. Don't do it against payment plans, right? Then the second one would be, is this a micro thing or a macro thing? So is this one client who's been difficult or one situation or one specific set of circumstances or 1 week that's felt overwhelming, right? You're making a micro decision. You absolutely want to stop when you're doing it from that place because any model you have in business is going to have micro issues, right? So stop right there and think about the macro. What would I be for a year from now? What do I want overall in my business? What am I actually about? Again, it's the example of the Facebook group I gave. There are micro annoyances in this Facebook group all the time. Everyone that has ever heard me talk knows that I fucking hate a ladder post. But what I am for macro is community and supporting one another and having a space that other women can promote themselves and all of those things. And so I'm not going to make a decision against that. I'm going to make a macro decision about what I want long term. And so those are the two hacks. And then the little third one over here is just wait a week to make any decision. Right? If you are coming from a place of feeling really against something or really triggered by a micro situation, wait a week to make that choice. Absolutely do not come to a decision from that place, because it will absolutely not feel simple. It'll feel really charged up and really complicated, and it absolutely will not be strategically aligned to what you ultimately want, because you're just in reaction. You're not actually forward thinking. So those are the three. Again, like it should feel that simple. There is not like this crazy decision-making framework that you should follow to be a good entrepreneur. Like the decisions should feel simple. They should feel aligned, and they should feel like they're what you're for. It really does not have to be as hard as most things get made out to be in our space. And so this is one of those things I always compare it to gratitude lists whenever I'm talking about something this simple, because that is one of like, I think the simplest and most transformative things where, you know, you hear make a gratitude list every day and you're like, sure. That's cute. I should do that. But my issue would never be solved by something as simple as making a gratitude list every day, but actually like having gratitude every day is like pretty much one of the most transformative things you could ever do in life, right? And these kind of things are the same with that. It can almost feel like, oh, sure, yeah, I'll just make decisions on what I'm for. How nice. But like actually one of the most transformative things you could ever do in your business is make macro decisions based on what you're for. So I really want you to try it, even if your brain wants to like eye roll it or feels like it's too simple or feels like your decisions are so much more complicated than that. We really challenge you to give it a whirl, because I promise it will make the world of difference. I see it constantly with clients, and I see how much it improves their decision-making power, but also the quality of their decisions. So give it a try. If you want to talk more strategy and more decisions, I'm hosting the Millionaire Mindset Forum. We're doing strategy this month. So the strategy forum will be on March 20th. I'm so excited for that one. I feel like I love me some mindset, and I loved that forum so much. I know all of you loved it too, which I'm so grateful for. But I'm so excited for the strategy one, because it's kind of the one that gets me the most fired up sometimes, because I just feel like, again, our industry just overcomplicates that in the biggest way, and it makes people just waste so much time, money, and energy. And so I'm so excited to simplify strategy for you, actually walk you through how I think about it, make sure that you feel completely like you just get it. Like I want you to feel like I fucking get it. I get mindset. I get business. I get how Lisa is thinking about these things. So you can apply it to yourself. You can apply it to your clients, and ideally walk away with so much more ease. Patricia, me too. I really love mindset, but I definitely get fired up about strategies. So I feel like there is just so much that gets overcomplicated. On my one-on-one sales page, I have like a Nishiki quote that's like, they muddy the waters to make it seem deep. And I talk about how that's what happens in the online space so often, right? Like we muddy all these waters around strategy to make it seem so deep and so intense and so complicated. And it really is not, it does not have to be. And so hopefully you will join me for the strategy forum to see that is true. So if y'all want to join me for that, I will put the link below. You can sign up for just strategy, or you can join us for all three. You'll get the mindset replay and get to come to execution forum in April. So I would love to see you all there. It has been so fun. Oh, yay, Patricia. I'm so happy you're coming. Amazing. Beautiful. So thank you guys for being here. I can't wait to see you, Patricia. And I hope that you all have a beautiful week. Love y'all. Bye.